Welcome back to the Two Promises Podcast. Let's dive right into another exciting adventure with BD and crew as he pursues his new passion of one day finding the most epic bourbon. The Two Promises team send their special thanks to Hobie and the Huckleberries for their masterful theme music. Grab a glass, relax, and enjoy responsibly.
Baby says she's leaving if I don't stop drinking wine. So I switched to whiskey and I'm feeling fine. Drinking that smooth, smooth whiskey. No more wine. I like straight bourbon. Baby, you try the ride.
Welcome back, everyone. It's good to have you all here, and I'm excited to record today's episode and establish the Whiskey of the Week. So the Whiskey of the Week is a super common one. I got to do a supply run with my mother to Sam's Club, and we picked up a whole handle of Maker's Mark. So, oh man, it's a classic, you know? It's not the old number 7 brand, but holy cannoli, the branding that they did by breaking themselves apart with that red wax coating. Everyone knows Maker's Mark. It is truly a beverage enjoyed around the world. Whenever I'm going to various countries, some of the old trustees that you can normally find in terms of the whiskey bourbon category are going to be Jack Daniel's and Maker's Mark. So I do want to establish that there as the Whiskey of the Week, and I'm currently enjoying a little Maker's Mark and Coke myself. I know, crazy. I've done a cocktail. All right. So, what I kind of want to get into is another principle that I believe in, or personal truth, or something that while I may not always represent this in its best form or even a good form, it is something that I try and I strive for in my life and to express in my life. And that is kind of a leadership concept of, if you're going to break it, you also need to build it. In the business world, that's a very common sign to put up in a business. If you break it, you buy it. The merchandise in here is costly. It costs us to house it, to warehouse it, for you to see if you would like to purchase it. So if you commit the act, you need to purchase the product. So a lot of times leaders fail to recognize this in our organization because, it's a different frame, right? But I just want to kind of ease this frame over. I'm not saying it's a apples to apples comparison, but I'm using it as an illustrative concept. So we just celebrated, most people around the world, I don't know, most people, it doesn't matter, but Christmas was a big event recently. And then, of course, the New Year's. And I've been really enjoying just doing some study on just different things that different people are getting excited about with this New Year. So I've been personally learning Hangul, and I probably mispronounced it, but every time I have tried to learn the pronunciation, it's very glottal, has been the most difficult stumbling block. But persistence and just kind of going fast and going for understanding has been helping me. But anyway, I digress, right? So I don't even know where I got off that topic. So I've been, the Chinese New Year, right? The Chinese zodiac signs. I know it wasn't the Chinese New Year, but we had a New Year. So I'm just kind of looking at some of these just different Chinese zodiacs and just developing my understanding more, right? So let's talk about the man, Jesus Christ, right? I think that his birth was just celebrated, and one of his lines in his life was, I think he was referring to the temple, and I think it was a Jewish synagogue or something. I don't know, but either way, he pointed at something. Could have been a whole government institution. He said, I'm going to break this down, or he might not have pointed to it, but he said something in reference to it. I'm going to break this down and build it back up in 3 days. So it was really awesome to be on Mr. Joseph Greco's podcast, and he is currently in Italy. So we just had a podcast with him. I'm going to make sure that he's got a mention in this podcast, and I'm going to find out anything that he's looking for and ensure that we can kind of do some show notes and some mentions and some stuff like that for you, Joe, because it was really awesome to be on there. And one of the topics we talked about, since you're in Italy, was the state of, say, affairs in the Middle Ages, or when a lot of these great architectural works of art were created. And I don't know if it was in Heidelberg or the UK or where it was that I, learned this bit of information, but sometimes 3 generations could pass in the building of a cathedral or a castle, or for a castle it could be even more, you know what I'm saying, based on their life expectancy, the difficulty of the labor, and the scope of the work. So we're going to get into a little bit of consulting here. As you know, I do earn some money on occasion in the consulting realm. So one thing that I can tell you all is that on my podcast, you're getting a lot of these bits and pieces of my consulting services absolutely free. So you're getting to tune in. You're getting some lessons learned from great mentors of mine, things that I've been able to learn either through books, or maybe I'm just discussing a topic that I'm curious about and trying to actively learn myself. But either way, I find it quite fascinating. So let's get back to, we've got this whole generations of people for this vision, and they are steadfast. They are working towards it. And think about a human being in that era that would have the confidence to say, I know so much about this that I could break it down and rebuild it in 3 days, right? Well, ultimately, he was crucified, and that rebuild was, very faith-based, right? Very faith-based. So he believed so strongly in the words that he was saying that he was willing to take them with him to the grave. He didn't need to prove it. He believed it so confidently. And if you're following the story of his life prior to his crucifixion, they say that he asked God to let this cup pass from him. And I don't know what that was supposed to mean, what cup he was referring to, but I would think it would potentially be that death, that crucifixion, right? So that's why I want to talk about this man's confidence. That is why, there's many reasons why he is celebrated the world over through many religions. He was of many things. He was Jesus, the Pisces in the age of the fish, I believe, or in the year of the fish, I believe. I can't remember, but do some research. You know what I mean? Like, there's some great truths that you can explore in some of these great topics that literally everyone on the planet has some conceptual, it affects their reality in some way, shape, or form, whether they know it or they don't know it. So I find that extremely fascinating. So if I'm going to follow and I use that as an illustration for faith, confidence, and institutions, right? And then now I want to kind of switch that over to, like, say, if I was to run an organization or if I was to run a team, what lessons learned have I received throughout my life, and how can I kind of rebuild some of these relationships that I might have been fracturing, and maybe not fracturing, because sometimes we get stronger through breaks and rebuilds, right? So we are being able to find different vulnerabilities and different ways to fortify against that vulnerability whenever there is pressure on us that causes us to reevaluate something that we believed or something that we were doing, whether that's due to complacency, intention, or ignorance. It doesn't really matter. So I just want to go over some lessons learned. If you've been following my story intimately or what, you may know that I've been on the phone with customer service agencies a lot, and I don't always show my best self in those examples. Well, that's because I have like I said, I'm struggling with some anxiety and some stress disorders that are extremely complex. So some of the biggest ones that I can think of in recent history would be, well, FedEx. I've had some not so nice conversations with some of your customer service peoples, and we're going to get into a little bit of this. And then also with the Department of Veterans Affairs. So I don't feel that it's right as anyone, and I'm not saying that I'm a leader in any way, shape, or form, but if I'm a voice and people are going to listen to me, look at me on social media, and listen to the things that I say, well, then I want to take this time to put a little bit of rebirth back, put a little bit of rebuilding back, and illustrate why I find so much value in the practices that I expect a professional organization to embody and to action on a day-to-day basis in the administration of our duties. So, for improvements, and I'm doing this, one for myself, one for the greater benefit of anyone who might be listening in, for improvement, for results, and really the greater collective consciousness of us as humans and our maybe conscious evolutions, or being able to learn more and see this planet more clearly. So one thing that I want to consider before we move forward is the body's natural tendency for homeostasis, for keeping it the same as it is. However it is that it got there, if it was slowly over time, the body is going to want to stay that way. There's going to be a resistance to any change. Now, with that being said, we can overcome resistance, but one big point that I think is another important element of homeostasis is congruence, okay? And we're going to kind of get into that a little bit more, but let's talk about homeostasis a little bit. I think I talked about it well enough, and that's the body's desire to stay the same. So let's just talk about maybe some mental homeostasis or spiritual homeostasis. Like, if we have built these belief systems around us through our experiences, and that has not been challenged for whatever reason, whether it's personal not challenging it, or other people aren't challenging it, or we're not recognizing the challenges for what they are, growth experiences in our experience, then we're going to continue probably to reinforce some of those beliefs. So just like with diet, if I continue to eat a diet that I know is unhealthy, eventually I'm going to gain weight and suffer other consequences if I don't catch it and correct it quickly. Okay, so psychologically, we are tied to a homeostasis with our beliefs. And if we don't really know what we believe, we're always going to feel slightly off. And that slightly off is going to vary in its amount of uncomfortability depending on what other things are off in our life and what we believe. And if we don't have a set anchor point, a set reference point for these core values that we want to be congruent with, that we claim to be congruent with, and we don't have those references, then we're going to be more susceptible to letting emotions or the moment or other people or relationships to cloud things. And again, if our natural default is homeostasis, the most comfortable pattern that we're most aware of, all of our efforts, if we don't guard them closely, we will be very prone to snapping back to that last place of what we would consider our normal or our being, right? So now let's take it from an individual level and apply it to an organization. Because yes, I've been heated, I've said some very mean things, and the intention was not to hurt, but it was to make sure that my communications were being decoded at the other end correctly. So, also, sometimes it's out of my control if my physiology dictates it because I'm in a fight or flight state, and there's only so much I can personally do to regulate that down if I don't have help from the external environment. So, that can really escalate tensions, especially with people who don't really know how to deal with being scared or frightened. So I don't want to belittle people or anything, because I know we're all where we're at for a different reason. And maybe the reason that you have that job or whatever is out of a need that you have not been able to fulfill. But recognize that your role there is to provide a service for other people who do have needs as well. And if they're talking to somebody on the customer service end, something has broken down. So instead of beating up these employees who are following their scripts and just trying to do what they believe they need to do to hold their job, from a manager's perspective or a supervisor's perspective, one core principle, and I know we're 14 minutes into it and I basically just laid the foundation, but one core principle is trust but verify. Now, that sounds like a very simple and easy statement, to trust the information you're given and to verify it. But whenever mutual trust and mutual purpose is so vital to interpersonal communications and organizational structure and productivity, the courage to verify can sometimes be too much. It can be hard to verify. So I just want to use an illustration of, say, the medical plan, because that's a recent one that I used. Now, anytime as a medical consultant or through my job in the military or whatever, that I am expected to be in charge of the care of people, the medical care of people, wherever I'm at, and that in whatever my scope of practice is, which, say, in my consulting world, my scope of practice is at the paramedic consulting level, but I can consult on different topics based on the relationship with my client, because I have a variety of extreme skills. But if they're asking me to provide paramedic coverage and protection in addition to whatever else that I might be getting compensated for as per the contract, well, I need to recognize that my scope of practice only allows me to render care up to a certain level. And from there, I am required by law to make sure someone higher in scope of practice than me renders care, even if I have previously been qualified to a higher level of care. So, but the basics truly are what saves lives. So the med plan is the first thing that we're going to check. So whenever I get a turnover, it's usually from somebody that I've worked with before, or I know, or I'm building this by myself. But it's like, hey, dude, here's the numbers. Here's who you call. This is how long it takes, blah, 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 blah. Now, they should tell me to call through the numbers and make sure that none of them have changed. If they don't, it's still my responsibility to do so. Because as we all know, things change, especially with COVID, especially with this. So if we know things are changing in our worlds, in our organizations, in our little microcosms, we should project and expect change elsewhere, right? So if we know all of our systems are changing and we've been relying on other systems to send resources to or to cross promote, well, a periodic review of all of those numbers to make sure that they work is essential. I'm glad it is, knock on wood, has never happened, but I would be devastated if I was in the situation where I was working with either my teammates in the military or a crew of people that were looking to me for medical support. One of them gets injured, and then I go to try to call the ambulance, and the number doesn't work. Now, I know that sounds silly, but if you've seen some of these med plans and you've seen some of these things that just different organizations just trust because they've been sitting on a dusty shelf for so long, well, it is a potential that you could find yourself in that situation with someone bleeding on the ground. Well, again, in the medical field, but also in your organization, what would be a comparable alternative? What would be a comparable thing you could put in there for, instead of someone bleeding on the ground and you doing what you can to save them, while also calling someone to get more help because it's required. So whatever your workspace environment is, or whatever your goal looks for, if you're leading a team or you're trying to build a team or you're just trying to work on your own self, trust but verify. If you're trying to improve yourself, this is a principle that you can take in. It also shows that you take ownership of your job or your required duties. And it also helps you, and if that's something that you care about, that helps you align them with your personal values. Now, a lot of times whenever they talk about coaching and like self-help and like, well, you got to find your true north. You got to find that thing that you're passionate about. You got to find your why, right? All that. Okay, that's great. But it also can create the same duality of yes, no, or it can create so much ambiguity that since it's all in that direction, you can wander that direction for a very long time, still make progress, but not really make, intentional direct progress to get there in a timeline or in a timely manner. Okay, so whenever you're taking ownership of your personal space, of your personal responsibilities, I don't care if you, like, I was a cook at Sonic, and as part of my roles is I had to do a lot of cleaning responsibilities, right? So I would do those even though my job description said cook. If I went down, it also related to all the cleanliness aspects. And if my personal values are that, I take pride in my work, I want to be healthy, I want other people to be healthy, well then I need to let my actions reflect those values, okay? So while true north is I want to make money, or I'm trying to be financially independent, or I want to form a charity, or I want to have 1 million downloads, or whatever that is, whatever that goal is, I don't know, I'm just throwing some things out there. Sometimes, you can't pull up that compass. Sometimes you can't look at your GPS. Sometimes you might have to have other things to associate it with, and it might be because of chaos, right? So if you've got your plan to go there, and then all of a sudden everything is just taken away from you, now you don't have your phone, you don't have your compass, you don't have these things, you should have landmarks, or maybe you can't open them up yet. Maybe you're too busy, your hands are full, you're stressed because now you're starting a new job, or you're moving, or you're adding a new relationship to the dynamic that you've already had. There's changes, right? And so you might not be able to always hold on to that true north and just have it so fixated in your mind that it's undeniable the direction that you're going. But if you can throw up some anchor points, some other anchors that can kind of terrain associate. So if I look up and I see, let's say a church steeple, because we talked about something like that, and a mountain in the distance, and then even a bank, now I've got 3 reference points that can help me figure out where I am in relation to my goal. And if I've looked at things in advance, I've prepared in advance, I can have a quick snapshot, and then I have now opened up options. Okay, so I just kind of went a little bit deep, but trust but verify. If you're and this goes both ways, so this is both ways. So let me just bring this around to a mutual purpose and mutual trust. In order for an organization to work well, and especially whenever there's complicated interpersonal dynamics, and sometimes what we perceive our leaders to do may not always be congruent with what they say they are doing. So a really good book on this topic is Crucial Conversations. I recommended it in a previous podcast that I was on. Again, Joseph Greco's as well, because I really, truly, highly believe in communication. So it talks about before you can have an actual conversation that is vulnerable to where people feel free to speak their mind, they feel safe to speak their mind, is it's based on mutual trust. You trust each other, mutual purpose. You're all working towards the same goal, that it goes both ways. We are all working. Our efforts are recognized towards the common purpose, and mutual respect. Respect. Yes, we respect positional authority, respect all these authorities, but we also respect the labors and the intelligences and the talents of the organization as a whole, right? So all this has to be known and felt for there to be true, honest communication and dialogue. So the example used in there is, say, a CEO of CEO of a business, very powerful lady, and she is like, hey, we need to cut costs. We're in the middle of this big push. We're trying to acquire some new assets for, our group vision or whatever it is. And so she's requesting that all of her employees in this season to copy on both sides of paper, and she is making sure that people are held accountable for it. So if they're going through all of these efforts and they're getting in trouble for not printing on both sides of the paper or wasting, and she's picking it apart as part of her duties as, at this point, as a financial person to maximize this acquisition, yet she's also in the middle of a very expensive office rebuild around the same time. Who knows? This could have been contracted and funded years ago, but from the employee's standpoint, she's getting a raise while everyone else is pinching pennies and maybe not getting the raises that they were expecting because they're in this acquisition time and it might not have been communicated. So if she also has the reputation of being a tyrant, being someone who lashes out, that projects very forcefully, that belittles and puts people down, now you have a very toxic work environment, and the ability for people to speak up and make changes that actually are going to matter, it makes it that much harder. So that's where we get back to that courage piece, right? So that leads us into accountability. We've talked a lot about personal searching, personal values, personal true north, personal homeostasis. So we've talked about personally being accountable, but now we can look into spiritual accountability, organizational accountability, political or sovereignty, and how all these little aspects of accountability work. So I just want to make it simple because accountability is tough. It's like one of the hardest things for anyone to do. And that's why we have accountability partners. And that's why sometimes our accountability partners, we might have a incentivized thing to make sure that we're both paying attention because, like we said, like me and Joe kind of discussed, because he made a very great point. He makes so many great points, and it's so easy to resonate off of his truth because he's an extremely, extremely wise man. But whatever it was that he said, the truth of the core it made me think of, and he might have even said this exactly, was you have to pay attention. And that payment can mean different things. So what I believe about accountability, or as I'm trying to work on about accountability, which has been a very big struggle for me because it's so difficult, is another quick quote. The last quote was trust but verify. This quick quote is, if you don't do it, it doesn't happen. This is about accountability. If you don't hold the standard for accountability, it doesn't happen. Why? Because you don't know if anybody else is holding that aspect of the organization accountable. And whenever you look at culture and stuff like that, maintaining a good, strong culture means we have to hold each other accountable. Iron sharpens iron. We have to be able to speak to each other clearly and freely with trust that if we do try to coach someone, they're not in such a negative space based on the work environment that we've created around them that they are going to immediately be defensive. Now, I'm not saying it's our job to manage everyone's emotions individually, but as leaders, we should have an environment that is conducive to progress, trust, mutual purpose, and mutual respect. And if you're seeing manifestations of that not being there, people being either super, super quiet, not speaking up whenever you're asking for true, honest feedback, and you don't understand why nobody is giving you that, right? That could be an indicator. It could be an indicator that people lash out and they project and they say really hurtful things and then maybe apologize later. Or all kinds of things. Think fight or flight, posture, submit, all things that you could do when you're attacked by a bear, but also things that are there in the office setting, right? So if you don't hold yourself accountable, if you don't hold the things you care about accountable, it's not going to happen. It's one of the hardest things to do. So why is Buds so hard? Because Buds is trying to find the people that are willing to at least try, that are willing to do it, right? So, but again, I just want to also say that lesson is also one of the easiest to forget because it takes constant vigilance. It takes constant preparation to maintain my accountability for the things that I truly believe in, whatever those values are, and trying to stay consistent in that effort. And again, it could be anything. So these are some little pieces, right? So we're talking about the birth of Jesus. We're talking, because we talk about the temple. We talk about breaking it, building it. And we talked about how I don't believe it's good for me to go yell at this FedEx organization and yell at the VA on the line, even if, it's justified realistically based on my medical condition and what happened. But I also truly believe that if I'm going to break it, I need to build it. So I do try to give constructive criticism as well because that's what the heart is. But they're getting that, instead of me giving it to them in a easily digestible manner, sometimes they're getting it as a big turd sandwich, right? Which nobody likes to eat a turd sandwich. I don't like eating turd sandwiches. Nobody likes that. So I'm trying to chunk it down as best as I can. And if you've been on one of those calls, if you've been in an organization that you've found value in any of my teachings, whether you've listened to my recorded lines, whether you've had a group sync because of any reason to, see where things might have changed, feel free on my website, twopromises.com. There's a donation button. I know you didn't hire me as a consultant, but if you feel like I've added value to you, and that could just be to the casual listener, to a business, to an organization, if I've been a consultant for you in the past and maybe I added value in a way that you weren't expecting and it wasn't part of the contract and maybe I didn't get paid or compensated for it, feel free. Take a look at that donation button and donate whatever amount you believe or you feel like donating. Any little bit helps. At the time of this recording, I still currently am unemployed. All of my efforts to receive compensation benefits through the VA have been stagnated for multiple months whenever I thought that this was the window where I was supposed to start getting some of these paychecks or some of my jobs were supposed to be starting. So my COVID experience is that I have been unable to get some of these relief things so far. I have been unable to get some of these unemployment benefits regardless of applications and some of these other things that are going on with these organizations that are holding money that belongs to me that are not giving it back to me. And the reason I believe it is because they're also trying to weather a very tough financial time too. But they have resources that I do not have. So right now, it is a very tough time for me. So if you feel called in your heart, if you've received some benefit from this and you also have the ability, Only do what you can when you can. I'm not asking for you to give out of sacrifice. I'm asking you to give out of any abundance and any amount that you just feel that you would like to give back, if that is something you'd like to do. The donation button is on twopromises.com. It's my PayPal right now. I've been trying to get that more professional, but unfortunately, I have not been able to get it to the level that I envision it yet. But it is a work in progress, like myself and so many others, and I do greatly want to say thank you so much for taking the time. I hope that you are finding value in this, that you are getting things out of this, because again, the desire is that we can grow together, and we can, the more of these truths that we can hold on to, and the more of these truths that we can maintain and perpetuate and pass on, then I truly believe we're going to be able to make so much more progress so much quicker than we could ever have believed imaginable. So again, thank you so much for tuning in. This is BD and the Two Promises podcast. I look forward to interacting and engaging with all of you, and have a great week.
Thank you for joining us today on this curious roller coaster of life. If this is your stop, please exit peacefully and enjoy the rest of your day. If you're ready for another one, just push play. Just a final note before you go. Thank you, and thank you for feeling. The distillation and aging process is different for everyone. I'm not quite sure what you're ready for. Sip slowly and enjoy responsibly.
Baby says she's leaving if I don't stop drinking wine. So I switched to whiskey, now I'm feeling fine. Drinking that smooth whiskey.